Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with the March meeting of Scottsdale Parent Council. And first, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is over here on the back wall. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, up next is our land acknowledgement. As we gather for this meeting, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We wish to acknowledge this land on which this SBC meeting is taking place. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Hohokam, the Acamel O'odham, and most recently, the Salt River Pima Indian community. Today, this meeting place is still home to many indigenous people from across Maricopa, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. Okay, so today's meeting agenda, we're going to start off, as we always do, with question and answers with Dr. Menzel. And then we're going to hear a little bit from Dennis Roller about capital planning that's coming up. And then we have a panel on drug use in schools with Josh Friedman, Chaparral Principal, Mr. Is it Fantier, Mojave Principal, Mr. Ferrero, and SUSD's lead nurse, Renee Tosto. And then we'll end our meeting, like we always do, with any updates that parents or representatives have, upcoming events, and so on. Okay, so if you have a question for Dr. Menzel, go ahead and write it. There's index cards over on the table, and hand it to me, and we will get it asked. Okay, the Arizona Department of Education has announced they're ending support for music and audio programs across the state. This directly affects the CMAS program at Arcadia, and the question is, what is the district doing to support offering these types of opportunities to students?
So that's a question that I don't have the answer to. I'll need to talk with Michelle Irvin, our coordinator of fine arts, as well as our career and technical education department to see how we're responding to that shift from the department, but I have not had those conversations yet, so I need to look into that one.
Okay. Okay. There have been news stories recently about grants from USDA that allowed school districts to purchase local produce, and these grants have recently been canceled. Is this something that has impacted SUSD food services, and if so, how has it impacted?
So according to a report that CBS did that Patty Bilberry was quoted in, the impact on Scottsdale Unified is about $100,000. And that impact not only relates to what we're able to offer our students, but has an impact on the local producers of those fresh fruits and vegetables within our community. And so we're going to continue to do what we can to provide the best quality nutrition for our students, but losing $100,000 isn't a small amount with respect to the commitment that we've made to do that. And hopefully at some point people will take a look and see that that investment is important both for the local economy and for the nutrition of our students. But right now it's about $100,000.
How much money does it cost SUSD to retain a lobbyist? And then I have a follow-up question if you want me to ask that first.
So we work with State 48, which is the lobbying organization that we've now used 2 years in a row. I believe the annual cost is about $36,000.
Okay. Why have a lobbyist? So what are tangible, intangible outcomes of having representation at the legislature?
So districts like ours and many throughout the state have procured their own legislative support at the Capitol. So when we're in session, there's important work being done as committee hearings are happening, as legislators are looking at bills that impact public schools that are going through. So for a district like Scottsdale, where we often come up in committee hearings and all the rest, the ability to be able to tell our story and know what's being said about us when we're not able to have people in those committee hearings is really important. Secondly, there are legislative priorities for our district that are important. So for example, when the funding and the allowability of certain funds for the tax credit use was eliminated or sunset, our lobbyists worked with various legislators to get that extended. It was not successful last year, but it's moving this year. That would not happen if we didn't have a person who was running point on that, working with elected officials to find champions for it, and then working with elected officials from around the state to be able to build that base of support. So it helps us in multiple ways. And then the relationships are really critical. And so to have someone who's got those relationships, not only with LD 3, 4, and 8 elected officials, but who also is connecting with elected officials who are committee chairs. They may be in other parts of the state of Arizona, but because this is a multi-client lobbying firm, she has relationships with other elected officials. It leverages our ability to influence public policy around public education in a way that, because we're doing the day in and day out of schooling, we don't have the time to be at the Capitol to make that advocacy a regular event.
So we're actually going to talk about that bill that deals with the tax credits later in the meeting in our legislative update. And just because this is my home school, I happen to know that Arcadia a couple of years ago spent $17,000 with that provision that was sunsetted, right? So they used tax credit funds for capital purchases. They spent $17K to make a robotics, lab for their students. So anyway, that just gives you some idea of money.
So there's a return on investment. That's one example. Another is that because we've been working hard to address the rising cost of health insurance, our lobbyist was instrumental in getting the $250,000 appropriation for the actuarial study that was done last year. Again, those things happen when you have someone who knows how to work the wheels of government and understands the priorities for our district, and that's why that investment's been important.
Okay, unless nobody else has another question, this is the last one. In the news reports on the impending changes coming to the Federal Department of Education, block grants have been mentioned as replacing the current funding model. What are block grants, and how would such a change impact SUSD families?
So block grants, and I've worked with them a long time ago in my career, community development block grants. The intent behind them is to say, here's an amount of money. We're going to give states the ability to decide how best to use that money. And then how it gets distributed looks different state by state because there may be different priorities. So it's designed to theoretically create an environment where the delivery of services is site-specific. The challenge we have with respect to the Department of Education and block grants is the largest federal funding that we receive, IDEA, special education, and title programming, particularly Title I for kids in poverty. So if you block grant special ed and IDEA, you have all sorts of problems because there are federal rules and regulations around the delivery of special education services. The federal government, when it was approved, indicated they would cover 40% of the cost of providing mandatory special education services. The federal government's never come close to that. We may be somewhere between 13 and 15% of those costs covered through IDEA allocations now. So they fall woefully short. If that money comes to the state and the state isn't required to follow the federal guidelines, then all bets are off in terms of how you know that you have resources available to provide support for students with IEPs. When it comes to title programming, if you don't identify those students who are in poverty who need that additional support, and states can use that money in any way they see fit, there'll be different groups of winners and losers. And so I think in terms of those two priority areas of focus, we know that many of our kids who, through no fault of their own, grow up in families that don't have the same level of assets and resources. So our title schools get that support so those kids are able to achieve their full potential. The risk in a block grant is that you lose the accountability for the intent of those funds when they were legislatively appropriated. And so I think in other areas of title funding, let's say professional development, so Title IIA or Title IV, some of those other things, you could potentially block grant those and create more flexibility for states. But I think for those core signature federal funded programs, IDEA and Title I, those should remain federally structured so that it's consistent across all states and all school districts.
So if a change like that happens, how much advance notice would someone like us get, right? Like if a big change like that is going to happen, how many months in advance will we know? Is there a time to weigh in? Something like that.
So a point of reference is that when the Congress approved the continuing resolution, which ensures the federal government's funded through September of this year. So the federal fiscal year is October to September. Our fiscal year is July to June. So we know that the funds for Title I and for IDEA are held constant based on what was appropriated this last year through September 30th. So we can budget based on that. What we don't know is whether or not the Congress will reach agreement on a budget and how they're going to fund those programs for the new fiscal year beginning October 1 of 2025. They might not get to that point until September. There's no statutory requirement for them to approve a budget before then. And you've all heard the government's going to shut down and what are the implications of that. We just don't know. So my belief is that if they're going to make a major change to a core federal program like special education or title programming, we would have more notice because the ability to shift how that funding is managed is pretty substantial. That doesn't mean that would be the case. It could be very a short turnaround. And then the Arizona Department of Education would need to be prepared to move very quickly to determine how they're going to proceed with distributing the funds that are allocated. My guess in this case is there's not another formula that they have in place that would change right away. So I think you would have some time because you'd be 1/4 of the way into the school year before those changes took effect. So I think we'd have some time, but I don't know how much time.
Okay, that was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you to our team for the conversations you're about to have.
Okay, now we're going to hear from Dennis Roller about capital planning.
Good morning. I'm gonna come up and stand by this handsome man in the gold tie. Can I just around the room real quick? Which school you represent?
Anasazi and Mountainside.
Cheyenne. Okay. So we are in the process of, as of October, doing a facility condition assessment, basically going around the district and determining life cycle usage of all of our facilities. So they look at the roof, they look at the air conditioning, they look at the plumbing, they look at the plumbing parts like water heaters and drinking fountains and things like that. And so they look at all of the stuff that is not terribly sexy, but it needs to be done. Just like at your home, you need to replace the carpet, you need to replace the water heater, things like that. So we've got 4 million square feet of schools under roof, 600 acres that we take care of in the district. And so we need to have a plan. And so this facility condition assessment is the beginning of that capital plan for the district. Usually that capital plan will roll into a bond initiative. Last time we went to a bond was when? Anyone? Bueller? 2016. 2016, we went out for a $229 million bond, which basically did the replacement schools, Pueblo, Kiva, Cherokee. We did the gym at Cheyenne and the science rooms at Cheyenne. We did the Innovation Center at Saguaro. We painted Arcadia. So a lot of things went into that. But there's constant wear and tear on our campuses that has to be addressed. And so we're going through that process now and determining what our capital needs are. The big thing that a survey of this kind with people walking around, checking labels and talking to people doesn't do is the what else. What else do we need on the campus? Is Title IX an issue at our high schools, making sure that the girls have the same thing the boys have? Is the stadium what it should be? Now, everyone might remember that we redid all 5 stadiums. We did the turf, we turned it from natural turf to synthetic turf, we did the tracks. But then most recently we did the lighting at Desert Mountain High School. Really cool LED lighting. Is that something that we need to do throughout our district? Scoreboards, locker rooms, auditoriums. Some of the schools, originally the high schools got rebuilt in 2008. Not all schools got all brand new buildings. Some of them have like the J building. Your auditorium is original to the school. And so those are starting to get older. 2008, we're already 16 years old, 17 years old at the high schools that were rebuilt, and so they're starting to see wear and tear. So beyond the facility condition assessment, I need to come see all of you. I need to go to the schools and find out what it is that you feel you need for your school. Is it more shade structures? Is it a different kind of playground setup? Is it maybe the parking needs to be addressed? Maybe the drive-through, the drop-off pickup, shade at the drop-off pickup, whatever amenities we might need for our schools moving forward over the course of the next 10 years. So I've set aside some time, a lot of time, actually 81 opportunities between now and May to be at the schools and talk to the community, the parents, the PTOs, the whatever it is, and you guys are kind of my starting point because I know you're going to go back to your campus and you're going to talk to someone at your campus, whether you're the PTO president, APT, whatever the case may be, because I'd like to just sit down and talk to you and understand what it is that you feel you need for your campus. Cheyenne, I don't know what it needs. It got a paint job, it got a science rooms, it got a gymnasium. Maybe there's some fencing issues to separate the city of Scottsdale's park to the school. Maybe there's, I don't know, because it's you that are there in the schools. I know that when it needs water heaters, when it needs chillers, when it needs cooling towers, when it needs a roof, I'll have all of that information and I'll bring that so that you guys can see that if you've heard there's been an air conditioning problem, Copper Ridge, for instance. Copper Ridge has got an air conditioning problem extraordinaire. And we're working to get that fixed. I can tell you how that timeline's going to look, but I don't know what else everybody wants for their school. So for the time being, we're calling it capital planning. Eventually, it may turn into a bond initiative, but for now, it's capital planning. And so I would like to invite all of you to go back to your campuses and find a time on my calendar through my admin assistant, Alice Ricks Cpos, and I can get the contact information if you can't find it, and find a time on my calendar. I've set aside a ton of time, and I'd love to just come out and listen to what you have to say. We'll add it to the list. We'll create this ginormous list of things that need to happen at our schools, prioritize them at every school, and see what we can do to make sure they're funded. Okay? Questions?
You want a physical time with the principal and or stakeholders at each school?
So, yes.
Like 30 minutes, a Zoom?
It's actually, I've set aside 90 minutes for, again, 81 times. So I've got daytime blocks set aside. I've got evening blocks set aside. So whenever you think your school can get the best attendance, for everybody to talk to me and tell me what it is that they need, what they want. And everyone might not agree on what those priorities are, but we'll work through that process. But yes, absolutely, we can not only be there in person, but we could certainly do a Teams option. I know everybody gets busy. Maybe you can participate while you're sitting watching your kids play soccer. So happy to do whatever we need to do to support that. But I think it's super important just to be face-to-face first. We are building a survey now, and through your input, we'll also get that survey out. So once we have the meeting, then we'll distribute the survey, because let's be real, how many people like doing surveys? Oh, only me? So, but if everybody understands that there's a legitimate purpose for it and that feedback is necessary, then I'm hopeful that we get more feedback than we would if we just blanket sent it out to everybody. Okay? Questions? Good? That is the question of the year. There are a lot of different factors. You heard a lot of questions about legislative stuff, what the feds are doing. We've got Prop 123 is a big question mark right now, And when that may or may not go to the election, if we go by ourselves, if we go for a bond ourselves, we pay for the whole election, and it could be upwards of $400,000 or $500,000. If we piggyback on top of someone else's election, like if there's an election for 1, 2, 3, a vote for that, or if there's a legislative vote or something else, City of Scottsdale has something to vote on. So there's a lot to talk about where that could be. It could be as early as November of 25, which would be very, very difficult for me to get to that point. Or it could be November of 26. So this is going to be an 8-year cycle. So we actually passed the bond in 2016. We've worked all of those projects out. I'm finishing up these projects as of June. And then basically, so we would, if we went in 26, it would be 10 years from the last one. We would work the projects for 8 years, and then 2 years of planning, and then go back out 10 years from now. Or 10 years from 26. So the plan is to not go back to the voters and beat up the voters with taxes and more taxes and more taxes. We believe that we're in a position at this point that we've paid down a large amount of our debt, that the taxes would not be any different. It'd be the same. It wouldn't be no taxes, it'd be the same taxes. So we think we're in financially a pretty good position to pass a bond and not truly impact our voters, but impact them in a positive way by keeping our facilities at the best that they can be. Okay? Okay.
Do you have a pretty good track record of getting those bonds passed?
I've only been here since 2016. I know that in 2012, they rebuilt all the middle schools on a bond. 2008, they built all the high schools, with the exception of Desert Mountain. So I would say from a bond perspective, the track record has been good. We've worked really, really hard since 2017, making sure that we were as transparent as we could be. You can go to our district website, find the bond information. You go in, you can find literally every project that we've done. There's, I think last time I looked on Smartsheet, there's 597 lines of projects that we've done over the course of the last 7-8 years. So to answer your question, yes. Okay, is that it? We good? Go back and tell your people at your schools, find some time. I'd love to meet with you guys, okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so very quickly, I'm going to give a community sneak peek of what's going on in terms of drug use in our communities. I encourage everyone here, anyone listening, to go explore the data dashboard from the Arizona Youth Survey. You can go by zip code, you can go by county, by state, by 8th, 10th, or 12th grade. You can also filter the results by type of substance. So what I'm showing you here, this zip code is where Arcadia High School is. And so this is the left is 8th grade, middle is 10th, upper is 12th. So this is like a overall plot of all of the most prevalent substances that these aged kids are using. This chart shows over time. So the top plot is alcohol, the bottom right is e-cigs, and then the bottom left is lifetime marijuana use, and the years are 2012 on the far left, and then 2024. So you have a 10-year perspective of how, of changing trends over time by age. So the 8th graders are in light green, the 10th graders are in blue, in the middle in blue, and then the 12th graders are in dark blue. So you can see that as the kids get older, more of them are using, and then there's some changes within the grade levels. Okay, so this is Chaparral zip code. Again, you have the what substances are everybody using, and then the changes over time. And it was really interesting. Not all I couldn't do zip codes for all the high schools because if you have less than, I think, 25 data points, they won't report it for privacy reasons. But it's a really easy dashboard to use. You can find it just by Googling Arizona Youth Survey, but we'll also share this link on our social media. So that's just a very rapid view of what's happening in the community. So I'll hand around this microphone. Okay, so we have questions for the panel now. And the first one I'm going to ask is, so at the district level, what trends are security, our school nurses, our school administration, what trends are you guys seeing for drug use?
I'll start. Josh Friedman, I'm the Director of Security for the district. The biggest trend we're seeing right now is vapes. And when I say vapes, what's in the vape could range from nicotine to THC or anything in between. Biggest challenge we're seeing with vapes is they're not really regulated. So somebody could buy a nicotine vape off the web or wherever, and it could really be something else, and that's one of the biggest trends we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Vaping is definitely a huge problem. The nicotine vapes is what we see for the most part. And we see that students are usually getting attached to these things through social media. So Snapchat, people selling through Snapchat and other social media, they can find a contact pretty easily, and it's pretty anonymous. So monitoring cell phone use might be a good idea as well. I haven't really seen anything harder than marijuana in a long time. If we do, it's like once every few years that we see something different from marijuana as far as a drug goes. And I don't think I've even seen alcohol on campus in a while, which is a good thing. One of the things we have noticed recently, though, is these like nicotine. It's not a gum. It's like it's almost like a pouch thing you put under your lip or under your tongue, and kids just pop them in and they get their nicotine fix that way. And that's a easily shareable thing also. So we haven't seen it a lot, but it is something sort of new that we are starting to see.
Those look like mints, right? Like candy mints.
Yeah, it looks like one of those old square pieces of gum that you would chew, like chewing gum, but it's actually like a nicotine thing that dissolves in your mouth.
Paul Furrow from Mojave. I would also echo what Mr. Pantier said. It's a lot of it has been the vapes that we do come across. I have not had any alcohol, and I don't know how long, so that's been a very good sign. But students are able to get the access to vapes pretty easily through like social media. There's even some websites they can order from, and they deliver them to your home. So if a student has been able to do that, that's another way they can do that too.
So can you tell us what some of the vaping devices look like? Because I know from my work in my other life that like they can be a hoodie string, they can look like a highlighter, they can actually write like a pen. So can you describe some of the more interesting devices you've maybe encountered?
Maybe I'll go first because it's not that exciting. Josh probably has more experience with the creative ones. The nicotine vapes that we usually see are usually colorful. I don't want to say they're marketed to kids, but I don't know, for some reason they're colorful and fun because sometimes they come in flavors like mango or mint or whatever for the nicotine vapes. And they're about the size of like a big lighter, I guess I would say. The marijuana ones are almost always in a pen shape. And they'll have a cartridge that's clear so you can see the liquid wax that turns into a vapor. But they are a pen shape. But usually there's two pieces. There's the cartridge, and then there's like the battery part of the pen, and they screw on together. So sometimes you'll just see the battery, sometimes you'll just see the cartridge, and sometimes they'll be connected, but it's an easy way for kids to recharge or whatever. There are also one thing we do find in looking at backpacks is just the charger for the wax pen. The charger for the wax pen is unique to wax pens, as far as I know. That also looks like it's like a USB on one end, and then it sort of, I think it screws into the bottom of the pen at the other end. So it's usually a short cord with a regular USB on one end, and then a little like threaded screw for the other end. So sometimes you just find that, and that will be evidence that the kid either had a vaping device for a wax pen before, or maybe has one somewhere else. But we haven't picked up any highlighters at school that are vapes. They're hard to find. In order to get a highlighter, you'd have to really be looking for it, or have a teacher who's really paying attention to their kids and what they're doing. But those devices are small enough that if you're wearing a long sleeve shirt, you can hide it in your hand, in your sleeve, and just, you're just sitting like this, taking notes with one hand and, maybe vaping with the other.
So does that happen? Kids will actually
Not
use
often.
during class?
Not
Okay.
often. Every once in a while I get a report from a teacher that says, hey, I think this kid is doing something in class, and if the evidence is strong enough, we'll go ahead and pull them down and look, and most of the time they don't have anything. It's just a hunch. But I'm sure it does happen. It's just so hard to catch. You really have to catch kids red-handed with these things to move forward.
If you can dream it up, they've made it. You guys have all been in school. You used to chew on the back of your pen. They look like big pens that you chew on all day long. They look like highlighters. I've got some pictures I can show later. I didn't get them to you soon enough to get in a presentation. But we've seen portable speakers, like the Bluetooth speakers, that you can flip out. It looks like a USB charging on one side, and literally it's the vape port that you can suck the vape. We've seen highlighters that look like highlighters work. They even say highlighter on it. They're in every color under the sun. Sharpies, there's little Mario figures for the Mario Kart. Appeals to the middle school and younger crowds. Basically, if you can dream it up, they've made it into a vape. And it's scary because, as Principal Pantier said, unless you're literally watching and catching them red-handed, we can't find them. They even make a backpack now that has a filter in it, so that you can, they make the camelbacks that you wear hiking, but the tube instead is a filter, so you can make like you're taking a drink, and there's actually a way where it'll give you water, but you can blow back into it, and it filters the vape so that you can do it all day long wherever you're at, and it looks like a backpack, has the ability to put your bag, your books in it, and everything else. And so literally, if you can dream it up, they are making it. We had a Sharpie the other day that looked like a Sharpie, and you can take the whole thing apart, had the cap, everything else, and in the back you plug it in, and that's how you recharge your vape. So literally everything. I got pictures I can show everybody after if you want to come up and see.
Is it getting better, worse in school?
Renee Tasto, lead nurse. I did talk a lot with the nurses, so I feel like whatever's being handled is a lot of times being handled by principals and security. The nurses really only get involved if for safety reasons. So if there was impairment in the classroom, if a student's sleeping, things like that, then they will get assessed by the nurse. But the nurses in general felt like it was less than 5 times a school year that they're involved to that level. The nurses also mentioned alcohol along with vapes, so maybe they're seeing kids and then sending them home. I'm not sure that students are actually being caught with alcohol, but most of them mentioned vapes and alcohol. Obviously, a couple THC vapes were found certain places as well, but vapes in elementary. Some elementary nurses responded that they are seeing them in elementary school as well. So.
Okay, so now I want to talk about education and enforcement. So when a child is caught with a vape pen or substance on campus, what happens? What kind of discipline do they face?
So usually those things are outlined in the code of conduct, so they're pretty consistent district-wide. And I know the assistant principals usually meet together to talk about those things sometimes when they come up. For nicotine vapes, I believe the code of conduct says anywhere from 1 to 4 days is appropriate suspension for being in possession or using. At Chaparral, typically we do 3 days for the first time offense. If the circumstances warrant it, we might also suggest that they participate in one of the diversion things through Not My Kid. So Not My Kid has a program called Project Rewind, which requires kids to do like an in-person portion and an online portion with their parents to create awareness about dangers of substance abuse. So they're a really good partner.
Is that
in
district-wide?
I believe they do offer it to all Scottsdale schools. There is a fee associated unless they are referred by a school. So they waive the fee when we send them there, which is great. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times the kids we're finding with vapes, they've been doing it for a long time, and there's an addiction, and they're going to need more help than just a couple hours of a class. Drug violations are usually an automatic 9-day suspension for a first-time offense, but that can be reduced if they participate in a similar program, either that same one or something else that we can find. Sometimes we'll reduce it to 5 days if it's a first-time offense. But a second offense within 365 days is considered a level 2 offense. And in those cases, we could recommend those students for expulsion or offer an alternative to expulsion, sort of long-term suspension situation. I think that covers the discipline part of it.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is that I work with the safety and security for this student advisory board, which is a bunch of the high school students that from each of the campuses they're brought together, and this year each of our committees has a goal, and the security committee this year from the students that they brought forward was to reduce the number of vaping incidents across the campuses, high school specific. But one of the things that they brought forward as they started looking at a lot of the data, which goes to what Principal Pantier said, is by the time they get to high school, most of these kids have already been hooked and doing it, whether it's starting in elementary or middle school. So we've been working with our student services, Shannon Cron, and with a lot of the resources from the police department to try and hit middle schools harder. Because we believe that if we can stop them, by the time most of them are getting to high school, a lot of them have been doing it. Yes, you're still getting your first timers, but a lot of it is coming at middle school. So the Student Advisory Board actually has taken that project on this year. They're really doing a great job of coming up with some resources that they work on it throughout this year, so they won't actually get to see some of them, the fruits of their labor, because they will graduate and move on, but they're putting together programs and videos that can go towards the middle school students to help with doing that. So going back to the education piece, we're trying to hit that pretty hard, more at the middle school level than high school.
One of our other good partners at the school level for after someone gets in trouble is our social workers. So usually when someone gets suspended for a substance abuse related thing, we'll also refer them to our social worker with permission of their parents so they can set up at least an initial meeting to get to know them, and maybe a scheduled meetings every once in a while to just check in and see how they're doing and provide any support as necessary.
So in terms of education, I did write down a few things too. So I know you can be referred to Not My Kid, but you as a parent can also go with your child and sign up with some of the classes that they have. I know Student Services set up for Community Bridges presentations, I think at each of the complexes last school year. Stephanie does an amazing presentation, so if you and your child could sit through her presentation, it's so eye-opening. It actually is a bit terrifying to see what's out there. And then in terms of behavioral health support in our community, NOAA has a huge complex at McDowell in the 101, and they will find a way, regardless of income or insurance, they will find a way to work with the children and the parents. And then if something, further is needed in term of inpatient treatment, Violanda Behavioral Hospital will work with you as well. I know that's not like a big preventative, but if you're to the part of like crisis, that it's a great place to go. And the kids that go in there are seen. They're not just sitting in the emergency room, observed for a certain number of hours and sent home, and then you don't know what to do. They will make sure that everyone is seen there and cared for. So,
Mr. Frere, are you seeing the same things in middle school?
For the most part, we've seen a little bit of a decrease on my side. This is my second year at Mojave. Coming into Mojave, met with some parents. There was definitely some use there, but we've kind of strengthened our sides on really looking at where it's happening. A lot of it, the popular place, I guess you could say, on I think all campuses would be the bathrooms, because there is no camera footage in the bathrooms. So one thing we've done strategically is we place admin on a rotating, just rotations to go check the bathrooms during the hot spots. One thing we've done at our campus, we've instituted an electronic hall pass system where we can kind of see who's leaving the classrooms at any time. So, and last year we'd have a report that something might have been happening in the bathroom, and then we'd have to solely rely on camera footage to see what was there. And like Mr. Pantier had said, like unless you catch students red-handed, it's very hard to trace, especially a vape substance, because it dissipates very quickly. So one thing we just have really focused on is trying to make sure we don't have the access to that, and it's actually dropped a huge decrease in what we've seen from last year to this year.
So is that because the kids know about it, or because you're?
The kids, and the one thing I would also say too is we've really pushed our see something, say something at Mojave, and we've had a lot of kids actually self-report, not tell themselves, but let us know that when things are happening. So we've actually cut down on that a lot too. So the students have kind of know that we're out there looking for it. So those opportunities are not there anymore. Not everything's 100%. Sometimes it still will happen, but it's very slim compared to what we were dealing with last year.
I'm going to take a question.
Thank you. Has the district looked into vape sensors in the bathrooms?
So we piloted 3 different brands at one of our high schools, and I would say we had more false positives than anything else, and it was not, after surveying the administration there, they would rather see 10 more cameras than the cost of one vape sensor. Now, I know the vape sensors are coming down in price, and the vape sensors are, the technology is getting better every year, but the ones that we tried so far, in talking with the admin, it really was, they were literally running to the bathroom every time between periods, and again, 20 people in the bathroom, how do you figure out who had the actual vape? Because the way it works is it notifies, it's kind of like a smoke detector, only different. It notifies you there's potentially, vape smoke in the bathroom, and then you got to figure out who did it. So even when we set them on silent so the kids didn't know we were coming in, again, there's 10 people in the bathroom, and you got to figure it out. So it was very time consuming and not producing the results we wanted. So at this point, we're continuing to look at the technology that comes up, but cost effective wise, it would almost be cheaper for us to hire a body to stand outside or inside every bathroom than it would to put a vape sensor or enough vape sensors to make a difference.
So I hear this question a lot from parents. It's probably one of the, this vape sensor. And it was one of the most popular ones when we were researching these questions for you guys. So the follow-up I want to ask is, it's been in the news that Mesa Public Schools has vapes and it's going well for them. So do you talk to other school districts, either within, our city, state, whatever, or even, is there any use of other people having success or best practices that you then bring to SUSD?
Yeah, so I meet with Mesa on vape sensors and other new technology. Mesa got a lot of new technology in the last year or two. We met with them, and one of the biggest differences between Mesa and us is a staffing model. And so they're able to respond easier. When we put one of the vape sensors up at Coronado, you know, there's 4 admin there, I think. There's 4 admin, you know, so there's 4 admin there, and they have 3 security guards to cover the entire campus. And so part of the challenge when we put the vape sensor there is they were constantly running there and trying to deal with vapes. That's all they were getting done all day. So again, just the return on investment. We do talk to Mesa. I've talked to Gilbert, has a couple that they're trying. I went out to the West Valley. Agua Fria has vape sensors that they're trying. Everybody, the ones that we tried, we got from other districts, like they're using them already. So again, it's just, there's a lot of different factors that go into doing it. And for us right now, we have not been able to find something that's been successful both in a staffing manpower issue and an actual sensor issue.
Okay, the other, by far the most popular question I get are about bathrooms. So, and you guys mentioned that vaping is, or that is a popular place to vape on campus. So what is the district, what are each schools doing to make the bathrooms a better experience?
So I'll start, and then I'll pass it down to our admin. I know as far as a district and a security perspective, both the facilities team, which is anywhere from 2 to 3 or 4 people on a high school campus, and the security team are going through the bathrooms on a regular basis. So they'll go through before, after passing periods. They may stand in the hallway during passing periods outside of a bathroom. If we know that there's been issues in a single bathroom, then they, you know, patrol it more heavily. We've also made some bathrooms off limits during certain times so that we can, when we're down staff for a day, we can corral them to certain bathrooms where we can better staff it or monitor it. And then, so from a district-wide perspective, we are encouraging all the staff and all of my security staff and partnering with facilities, because it's not just the vaping, it's the vandalism that occurs in the bathrooms and that kind of stuff. So we're working with facilities to check the bathrooms and try and take care of things as quick as possible. And that's actually another initiative for the facilities committee out of the student advisory board, is how do we make the bathrooms better. So the student advisory board is really seeing the problems and trying to take those up as well.
At Chaparral High School, we have, I was just counting them in my head, we have at least 13 locations where there's a male and female restroom. So between our 4 or 5 security guards, they just can't be everywhere all the time. But that's pretty much the most important thing we can do is increase visibility and make sure we're patrolling those bathrooms as often as possible. Sometimes our kids are doing it during class instead of during passing periods. The passing periods are the toughest because, that, like Mr. Friedman said, it's a group of people. So something might be going on, but if nobody's like holding on to it, you can't just assume that they're vaping in there. And sometimes during class, if they're doing enough vaping, it'll set off the fire alarm, and we'll have an evacuation so we can go back and look at camera footage and things like that to try to help us out. But we've got a lot of bathrooms, and we don't want to lock them because then the kids complain that they're not able to use the bathroom. So we'll see. Long down the road, I heard that Kiva has those bathrooms where there's like a common wash station area, and then each of the stalls they're not like male-female stalls. They're just a bunch of stalls, and then the wash station is outside. So it's a lot easier to monitor what's going on with those bathrooms. And moving to that model would be very good for that reason, but also extremely expensive to remodel the bathrooms we have. That would be ideal.
And I would also say, like with the passing periods, we did see that last year once we started hitting the bathrooms a lot more at the middle school level, that it was starting to happen in class time. That's one other reason we went to the digital hall pass, because we can limit how many kids can be out at a time. So we can make sure there's no more than 5 kids that can go to the upstairs boys' restroom at one time. The pass will block them until student checks back in.
Can you describe the digital hall pass? Like, is that
Sure.
like
Um,
easy to put in other
so,
schools?
Yeah, it's one of those. I had when I came back from SUSD, I was in SUSD, went to Paradise Valley for a few years, and then came back. That's where I was introduced to it. Kind of saw what was going on at Mojave. We just the manpower was not there all the time. We can't be everywhere at every moment. So let's see what we can do to minimize that. It's actually real simple. It's through the students' Clever accounts, they just like what they would go into for IXL or anything else. They create a pass. They need to go to the bathroom. The teacher gets notified, can say yes or no. So instead of the old school, I need a bathroom pass to the teacher, it's quick, it's digital. Admin, we monitor it from our positions, and so do our secretaries, so we can kind of see who's out there at all times, like where people are going while they're going there. And it puts time limits on there. So if they're gone for 10 minutes, we'll get a warning like so-and-so is out for 10 minutes. Why are they out for 10 minutes? And then if it goes to 20, it's in red, and it's like, okay, what's really going on? Now, most of the time, somebody has forgot to, when they get back to the bathroom, log out, that their pass is completed and stuff like that. But it just gives us an awareness of what's happening, what's going. But the nice thing is, too, it does limit how many kids can be out at a time. And for example, if we know there's a group of students that like going to the bathroom together, we can block them from going. So if Mr. Pantier and I like to meet up, I can go in the system and say, if Mr. Pantier's out and I try to make a pass, it will block me. So now it doesn't put the pressure on the teacher to say no, because if in the past it'd be like, if these two kids want to go out, then it's the struggle of, well, I really need to go to the bathroom versus, are you really going to the bathroom, or are you doing something you shouldn't be doing? So it kind of just minimizes that. It was a little bit of a learning curve, a little bit for the first couple weeks of school, but now it's just very seamless. The kids get to it. The kids they knew once we started doing it. When I had my back to school nights with some parents, like it's a little bit of a big brother step, but a lot of the parents were very receptive. They're like, nope, keep doing it. It's great. And the kids kind of even saw like the bathroom times of missing class has gone down because it has these extra steps that they have to get their Chromebook out. They have to do this. So it's not like a quick escape just to go hang out in the bathroom or go wander campus. So we were able to really see what's going on. Any other?
I actually want to ask real quick. So I know that the district has dual settlement funds, and I know we maybe can't know a number, but given that Mr. Roller just talked about capital planning, like if you guys had money to buy something or implement a program, what would it be?
I got my program, so I'm okay right now.
Yeah, for me, it'd be remodel the bathrooms. Aside from increasing our level of security to a point where we could monitor everything, and then, they would basically just be bathroom monitors, which is a little bit of a waste of time. So I think education has a lot to do with it. Hopefully there's some money in there so we can provide some more education to students that really means something to them. That's not just somebody saying, hey, don't do drugs or whatever, but that there's some research to back up how bad it actually is. And I know that's out there. It just has to come across in a way that students will sort of accept it. Those are the biggest things I'm thinking about.
I do know that the nurses and the social workers had a training with Catch My Breath, and I think there's plans for the social workers to do some educating on the campuses as well. So I don't know if that came from those monies, but.
So there's no one easy solution for this. I do want to say that the Hall Pass, there's about eight programs that I can think of off the top of my head. We've evaluated a bunch of them. Coronado High School, I think it was last year or the year before, for a couple years did a Hall Pass system. It was a different brand, but same concept. So we have been evaluating it. We've been talking about it as a district. A lot of it comes down to the engagement and participation of the staff. And so that's a big thing, especially nowadays when teachers feel like they have a million things to do. And so just adding another thing on their plate of now you don't just say go to the bathroom, you have to do other stuff. So, we're looking at principal. For ours, example over there to see that, yes, it can be done and work. And so we are looking as part of the district-wide to, once we see how things go, is evaluate what we may do as a district. But there is no easy solution. I think putting people in the bathrooms is probably, or outside the bathrooms is a lot better than the vape detectors until the vape detectors get better. But again, it's a waste of resources to have you sit there and that's all you do all day. So I think there's a lot of options out there. We just haven't found the right one for the district yet.
I don't know if this is on. I was just going to ask, how is it communicated to students what their repercussions are, what the consequences are of being caught? Or is it only sort of after it happens, then people hear, the lore of what happened, I mean, is it, like, I think sometimes an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
You mean you and your child don't read the code of conduct every year and see what no, I'm just kidding.
That's probably something we can improve. I mean, we get on the announcements pretty often. We have daily announcements that are live, streamed into the classroom from our student anchors, and sometimes the administration will go on there. I don't think I've ever really gone on there consistently to be like, hey, if we catch you vaping, you're going to get suspended for 3 days, because I don't really want to come across that way. But I think
If they
it's
get
important for them to
suspended,
know.
is that something they have to report for college? Because that might be motivating.
No.
No?
No. So discipline infractions are part of the student's educational record, but they're not part of a transcript. Typically, the only time that somebody wants discipline information is if it's a military academy or a law enforcement group. They will ask for discipline records sometimes, but otherwise the college in general is not going to know anything. Sometimes guidance counselors have to answer a question like, are you aware of the student ever, having a serious infraction or whatever? And if it happens during freshman or sophomore year, usually it's not a big deal and they're not going to remember it.
So this is the last question I'll ask, which is like, what other steps do schools take for prevention and education?
Well, one thing I like to advocate for, especially when I go down to my feeder meetings, when I meet for registration, I meet with 5th grade families coming up. I'm very transparent. I talk to my friends and their kids all the time. One thing I do tell parents is, don't play the blind eye. Have the conversation with your student about what if you come in contact with somebody who is doing this, because unfortunately at some point as they're growing up, they're going to come across it somewhere, and it may not be at school, it may be at a movie theater, it could be anywhere. I tell parents, you want to have that conversation now, because you don't want that conversation to happen between two 13-year-olds, because we kind of know what's going to happen with two 13-year-olds putting their brains together and probably making not the best decision. So that's a big thing I always try to tell parents, to just get involved and have that conversation. I know it's not the most fun conversation to have, but it's what do you do when you're put in that predicament, because sometimes they'll go into a fight or flight mode. Like sometimes when we've had students we've had caught with things, it's, sometimes I've had that, like, wow, I did not think you would be doing that. And it was one of, I didn't know what to do. I kind of was pressured and I just made a quick decision. So that's just something I kind of just advocate to parents all the time, is make sure you're having those conversations with your students. So if they're ever in that situation, they can make a better choice versus something right there on the fly.
I totally agree. The only other thing I would add is we do some big presentations about every year or once every 2 years, where we get at least 2 grade levels in the auditorium and do a presentation that is like a drug awareness or something like that, related to vaping, either in connection with Not My Kid or one of the other organizations.
And just to piggyback on that, that's something we're exploring now too at Mojave, is to make sure we can kind of get They're Not My Kid into through our science classes at least once a year, or at least go cohort by cohort, so at least everybody gets it there. So we're on that process of working on that.
The only thing I would add is we've seen it elementary schools. The vaping starts young, and I talked to a couple of the parent groups at the different elementary schools, and they're like, "Well, I can't have the conversation. I don't want to put the thought in their mind while they're in elementary school." And all I would tell you is you need to pull your head out of the sand, because the kids are doing it. If you're not talking to them, they're going to get it from their friends. And unfortunately for us, we've had a lot of elementary school kids that are getting it. One kid has an older brother, they get it from the older brother, and then they're on the playground, and now we have 4 kids doing it, and they all try it, and then it just perpetuates the cycle. So then why aren't we starting education in the 5th grade? We are actually starting younger. We're working on, through some of the dual settlement money and stuff, we are starting to push into the elementary schools. It's a process, but we can't do it all. We haven't said the word today, but I'm surprised. But fentanyl is a problem, and we had a child that not overdosed, but took fentanyl, bought a pill from somebody at school, and this was in a middle school, so we're not even talking a high school kid. We're talking a middle school. So again, it's happening. The vapes, because they're not regulated, people are putting stuff in the vape. So I'll tell you, how many of you have heard about us doing active shooter training, lockdown stuff? We do that all the time. It's the new thing we talk about all the time. I'm more worried about a child that gets a tainted vape, fentanyl tainted vape, and shares it with 6 other of his friends, and now we're dealing with an overdose of fentanyl because they're sharing a vape. That's happening every day. We're just lucky so far that we haven't had a tainted vape, but the kids are sharing vapes. So if you're not talking to your kid about it, then somebody else is. And as much as we're pushing into all the classrooms, and the admin is doing a great job of finding the root cause, they don't just suspend the kid and say we're done. They're looking for the root cause, and with parents' permission, getting them to talk to social workers and figure out, was it depression, was it a fight, what the reasoning is. It's literally, we got to get to what the root cause is of this. And we were all in school when you saw the posters on the wall, "This is your brain on drugs," and the frying eggs in the pan. And nowadays it's got to be social media, and we need to push in with social media. That's the exact the same thing we saw, but needs to be on social media, because that's where the kids are getting it. And I do, again, want to give credit to the Student Advisory Board, because they are really working on putting together those little ads that we can push out starting next year with all of this stuff. And it's coming from the students to the students, the same stuff, "This is your brain on drugs," and all the fun stuff that we saw when we were in school with cigarettes and things like that. The kids are actually working really hard to do something for their own peers for the future. So
I wanted to say too, I know a lot of the schools do have presentations in 5th grade. I usually have Honor Health come in, and they have a Tar Wars program. So I have them in every year. I already had them in this school year. Other schools do it as well. So on top of any other push-in that the district is doing. I wanted to also mention the edibles. So that's a good conversation for especially younger students too. There was another school district where a student showed up. A lot of parents have them at home, and they think it's like candy, and they, brought them and shared them with their friends. So those are good conversations too, to stay on top of with the little kids about, don't eat anything that someone else offers to you, and explain real reasons why, so that they understand. And then I think a lot of our push for vaping really has to be about the damage that vaping does in a short period of time, versus you're better off smoking actual cigarettes than vaping. The damage can be extensive in a really short period of time, 6 months to a year, where some kids ended up needing lung transplants. If you've ever sat through the Community Bridges presentation, you would see that there as well. So yeah, we're starting 5th grade. I don't know how much support we'd have from parents going much earlier, but they seem ready for it then.
So I'm going to open it up to questions, and make sure you're talking into a microphone.
I was just going to ask if any of you have seen the laced toothpicks on campus. That's happening too, laced with either drugs or nicotine.
we've seen the nicotine ones in the district, but not. I think we have one case that I know of where we had the nicotine ones.
I was wondering if you could explain why suspension is used as like your first line of attack when you find kids with drugs.
I wouldn't say it's always the first line. It is sort of what's outlined in our code of conduct to help us maintain some consistency, but I would say there are exceptions to the rule as well. So there are cases when, if I'm suspending a kid for a vape, maybe it's only a 1 or a 2 day suspension instead of a 3, depending on the circumstances. And a lot of times those are case by case. If, I won't get into details, but sometimes there are exceptions we make, and there's always an educational component attached to it, whether that's part of the conversation or the referral to Not My Kid. I believe that students do need for significant infractions like that suspension can be good. Obviously, there are some cases where a kid's suspended and they're just happy to stay at home all day. In some of those cases, we may do an in-school suspension instead of an out-of-school suspension, but we don't have staff for in-school suspension. So oftentimes that kid will be in the library, and the librarian will be monitoring that student for the day. But at least that way the kid is at school, required to not play video games or be on the cell phone.
Is there research that shows that it's effective? I understand.
So the question is there research that shows suspension is effective?
I would have to probably defer to Shannon Cron and someone who's more familiar with the development of our code of conduct.
Can you say who
research.
develops the code of conduct?
Usually it's a committee of people that also involves student services, student support services.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
So since we've been talking a lot about vaping, I wanted to talk about something positive. My son is actually trying to initiate an ordinance. So I'll just go ahead and, he wrote me a little bit. He's part of the student advisory board, and this is why they're really involved. And I think when kids get involved at the high school level and really see the impact, I think it helps other kids kind of get involved. So in Scottsdale, the smoke-free ordinance prohibits people from smoking in public places and places of employment. But that definition of smoking doesn't include vaping. And so my son and some of his high school friends, he goes to Desert Mountain, he's a sophomore, they have a petition to the city council to amend this definition to include vaping as part of this particular definition. And what he's trying to do is get enough parents to go ahead and say, yes, we support this, so that he can get on the Scottsdale City Council's official agenda meeting. He's met with city councilmen, he's emailed pretty much all of them. He's working with the Blue Zones, he's working with Cancer Society. So he really feels that this is an issue. He experiences when he first entered Desert Mountain in the bathrooms, and since then, he's been really trying to make an effort to bring about awareness. So I have the scan. If you all could pass this along to support him getting on that agenda, him and the other students, that would be wonderful.
So if you share
Awesome.
that graphic with me, I can send it out through SBC's channels. So would having that ordinance be revised help SUSD?
Yes and no. And the reason I say no is the laws are in place already. Like, you cannot vape on campus. It's only as good as the enforcement of it. And again, we have, in our biggest high schools, you have 4, maybe 5 administrators trying to deal with a plethora of things in addition to running a regular educational institution. And so, yes, will it make a difference? I think it will, because the more we can curb it in the public spaces where the kids are seeing it, that's where a lot of the exchanges take place, or in the parks, and then they try it. That's where the last big elementary school group that we had, they were doing it in the park right down the street from the school. So yes, I think a lot of it, but I do want to commend your son. I also want to let everybody know that we have, in addition to that, there's a Arcadia High School student who started his own nonprofit who is distributing Narcan throughout the entire state. So I agree with you. I think
Can
the
you tell
kids
us what
helping
Narcan
kids.
is, in case you don't know?
Oh, Narcan is a drug that reverses, if given quickly, the effects of fentanyl and other opioid overdoses, if given in a quick manner. And am I right there, nurse? Okay. And it doesn't have any negative effects potentially, but again, students helping students, trying to break the cycle, and so we have a lot of great students within our district that are trying to do that. So commend your son. And
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, our panel. I know it's in the middle of the school day and a lot of you have other places to be, but I really appreciate you coming, giving the time, and answering all of our questions and talking to us. Okay, so do we have any reps who have anything they'd want to announce or bring to our attention? Okay. All right, so I have some real quick executive board updates. First is our legislator update. So Lisa couldn't be here today, but she wanted to bring a couple of bills to our attention that either have an impact for public education in general or specifically to SUSD. So the first one is a resolution. So this would go on the ballot, and then all of us would vote on it, right? If this passes the both chambers of the Arizona legislature. So this is the aggregate expenditure limit, and it would waive it for next school year. If you guys remember, the AEL, that's its nickname, was, I think it is from the 80s. And at the time when they passed it, they were like, oh, we'll never hit this limit. Well, now we're hitting it every year. And then they usually give a one year, they'll waive it for 1 year. So that's what this is. It's passed through the House committee. Somebody in the House objected to the entire House voting, so now it's kind of at a standstill. This is something, it would go into effect, I want to say, in late April, and it usually is resolved right before the deadline. So if it's not going to be resolved, I'm sure you'll hear from us that to tell you to get in touch with your elected representatives, because it would be catastrophic to all school districts if it goes into effect. Okay, the next bill is from the Senate. So this is a bill, so this would go to the governor's desk. And it's Senate Bill 1437, and this is changing the mandatory reporting requirements. So duty to report abuse of minors would be expanded to school district and charter, the equivalent for charter schools, so to governing board members. Right now, if you're a teacher or administrator, you're a mandatory reporter. And then it modifies what you have to report. So basically, you have to, I think everybody has to call the police now when they suspect something, and then the process goes from there. Okay, so this is also a bill, so HB 2074. This expands current program, school safety program, which will give money to schools to hire school safety officers. So these complement SROs, right? So the school safety officers, I think they can be maybe off-duty police officers or retired, but they don't have to be. And then some other things it does, it gives money for equipment and infrastructure improvements, training requirements for both school, district and charter schools, and then exempts, so all public buildings, right, you can do a free public records request for their blueprints, but it would exempt schools from people being able to request their blueprints. Okay, another bill from the House, 2164. This is the ultra-processed food bill that we brought this to your attention last time. I am 99.9% sure that SUSD already does not offer ultra-processed foods, but this is something that would apply to other school districts and charter schools throughout the state. Senate Bill 2213 gives $3.8 million from the state general fund to support free and reduced lunch for children whose families meet the income requirements. And then the interesting thing about this one is the legislature intends this to be considered like happening every year in the future year. This has passed the House and is waiting for a reading in the Senate. Okay, this is the bill that Dr. Menzel mentioned, and that I mentioned knowing what Arcadia had spent. So this is, all of our schools can use tax credits. And last year, or maybe the year before, there was like a specific category, so if for a capital purchase, right? So a piece of furniture, a 3D printer, or whatever, is a capital purchase. You were no longer allowed to use tax credit funds for those specific items. And so this bill will give us 5 more years to be able to use tax credits for capital items. And then the ABCD is the details of what you can use those for. Last year there was positive momentum around this bill, but then it didn't end up getting a hearing. This year it's going much better. And this is something that Alexis Sussdorf, who we saw in January, she has been very active in kind of shepherding this bill through the legislature. And of all the bills we've just talked about, right, because we're already doing the ultra-processed foods, this one directly impacts SUSD kids. Okay, so that was all of our legislature update. Our next general meeting is an evening meeting. It'll be right here on Wednesday, April 16th at 6 o'clock. The topic is AI in the classroom, and we'll hear from Dr. Michelle Watt. And then hopefully there is a subcommittee on the Student Advisory Board, which you guys heard about, right? It's made up of high schoolers from all 5 high schools in SUSD. There's a subcommittee on AI in the classroom, and they are going to be invited to come attend that meeting as well because it's an evening one. Okay, next Thursday here at 6 o'clock, there is, we had this event last year, so this is a teen driver safety event. If you have a teen driver, or if you will have a teen driver, I highly recommend this event. It is full of really useful information. You can attend with your child if you want, or without, or it can just be you. If you're gonna bring your kids, they should be 13 and up because they do talk really real. Unfortunately, this is information that is always useful. But yeah, I highly recommend it. There's stuff that like you wouldn't think about that's relevant, especially for being in Arizona if you end up having an accident and you're liable for it. There's stuff information every parent should know. Okay, so we're about, the election committee has been formed for next year's executive board. I know it says they're open now. They'll be open. You'll see information about this probably later today or tomorrow because I didn't have all my ducks in a row, but soon. All right, budget update. We've had several more donations from schools that we're really grateful for, and then some more grant funding come in terms of expenses. It's just nothing different from last month except for the email service. And then, as always, we're a nonprofit. We don't spend money on anything interesting, like liability insurance, email, website, and we rely totally on donations to make all of these meetings and information sessions happen. I really appreciate all of you, giving your time to come here today. If you have any questions, you can always email president@scottsdaleparentcouncil.org, and we'll figure out who to connect you with or how to answer your question. And I'll hope to see you next Thursday at the Teen Driver Safety event. We also have flyers back there on the back table if you want to take some back to your school. And if not, I'll see you in April. Thank you.